Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The morning sun filtered through the cafe's large windows, casting golden streaks across the worn wooden tables. Sarah Chen sat in her usual corner spot, fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, watching the world wake up beyond the glass. At 32, she had grown accustomed to these quiet moments before the day demanded her attention. The cafe had become her sanctuary, a place where she could exist without the weight of expectations, or the ache of loneliness that had settled in her chest like an old friend. She was about to open her laptop when the bell above the door chimed. Sarah glanced up automatically, a habit she'd developed over months of sitting in the same spot. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him. David Martinez walked in with that same confident stride she remembered from glimpses across the fence that separated their backyards. He was the son of her neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, though at 28, calling him anyone's son seemed almost ridiculous. Sarah had watched him grow from a distance over the years. First as a lanky teenager who helped his mother with groceries, then as a young man who'd left for college, and now as someone who'd returned home to help care for his aging mother. Their eyes met across the crowded cafe, and Sarah felt her heart skip in a way that reminded her she was still very much alive, despite the numbness that had settled over her life since her divorce 6 months ago. David's face broke into a smile of recognition, and before Sarah could process what was happening, he was walking toward her table. The cafe suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. "Sarah, right? From Maple Street." His voice was warm, with just a hint of uncertainty that made him even more endearing. She nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. "David, it's been a while. Mind if I sit? Every other table seems to be taken." He gestured around the cafe, and Sarah realized with a mixture of panic and excitement that he was right. The morning rush had filled every available seat. "Of course," she managed, closing her laptop and moving her things to make room. As he settled into the chair across from her, Sarah caught the faint scent of his cologne, something woodsy and masculine that made her remember what it felt like to be desired. She pushed the thought away, reminding herself that she was still healing, still figuring out who she was without the identity of being someone's wife. "I heard about the divorce," David said gently, his dark eyes filled with something that looked like understanding. "I'm sorry. That must have been difficult." Sarah's chest tightened. In a small neighborhood like theirs, news traveled fast, but hearing him acknowledge her pain so directly was unexpected. "Thank you. It was ... It was time, though. Sometimes things just run their course." The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The truth was messier, more painful. Her ex-husband had grown distant, choosing work and other distractions over their marriage until she felt like a ghost in her own home. The loneliness had been suffocating. "I get it," David said, surprising her with his directness. "I went through something similar a couple of years ago. Not marriage, but a long relationship that just faded away. Sometimes you don't realize how lonely you've been until you're actually alone." Sarah looked up at him, really looked, and saw something in his expression that mirrored her own experience. There was a vulnerability there, a recognition of shared pain that made her chest ache in a different way. "I never knew," she said softly. "I mean, I've seen you around the neighborhood, but we've never really talked." "I noticed you too," he admitted, his cheeks coloring slightly. "More than I probably should have. You always looked so put together, so content. I used to wonder what your life was like." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Sarah had spent so many years feeling invisible, even in her own marriage, that the idea of someone noticing her, really seeing her, was both thrilling and terrifying. I wasn't, she said before she could stop herself. Content, I mean. I was just good at pretending. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their confessions hanging between them. Around them, the cafe buzzed with the energy of people rushing to start their days. But Sarah felt as if they were in a bubble, separate from the world. Can I ask you something? David's voice was careful, hesitant. Sarah nodded, her heart beating faster. Would you like to have dinner sometime? I mean, as neighbors, as friends. I know you're probably not ready for anything complicated, but I'd like to get to know you better. The real you, not just the woman I see working in her garden on Sunday mornings. The invitation hung in the air between them, and Sarah felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. But with it came fear, the terror of opening herself up to someone new when she was still so fragile. She started, then stopped. How could she explain that she wanted to say yes more than anything, but that she was terrified of letting someone see the broken parts of her? You don't have to answer now, David said quickly, seeming to sense her internal struggle. I just thought well, we're both starting over in some ways. Maybe we could figure it out together. Sarah looked at him, really looked, and saw kindness in his eyes, patience, understanding. When was the last time someone had looked at her like that? I'd like that, she heard herself say, surprising them both. But I should warn you, I'm not very good company these days. I'm still figuring out who I am. David's smile was gentle, transforming his entire face. That's okay. I'm pretty good at figuring things out. It's what I do for a living, actually. What do you do? Sarah realized she knew almost nothing about his life beyond the glimpses she'd caught over the fence. I'm a therapist, he said, and Sarah felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Of course he would be good at reading people, at seeing through her carefully constructed walls. Oh God, she said, covering her face with her hands. You must think I'm a complete mess. Sarah. His voice was firm but gentle. Look at me. She lowered her hands reluctantly. I think you're someone who's been through something difficult and is trying to rebuild. That doesn't make you a mess. It makes you human. And brave. The word hit her like a physical blow. Brave. She didn't feel brave. She felt scared and broken and lost. I don't feel brave, she whispered. The bravest people usually don't, David said softly. They just keep going anyway. Sarah felt tears threaten, but for the first time in months they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of being seen and understood by someone who didn't try to fix her or rush her healing. Saturday? She asked, her voice barely audible. Saturday, he confirmed, his smile widening. There's a little Italian place downtown that I've been wanting to try. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet conversation. Sarah nodded, feeling simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. I'd like that. David glanced at his watch and sighed. I should probably get going. I have a client in an hour, and I still need to pick up my mother's prescription. He stood, then paused. Sarah? Yes? Thank you for saying yes. I know it wasn't easy. After he left, Sarah sat alone at the table, her coffee growing cold as she processed what had just happened. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen, wanting to text her sister Emma, wanting to share this moment with someone. But the words wouldn't come. How could she explain that sitting across from David Martinez for 20 minutes had made her feel more alive than she had in years? The rest of the week passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Sarah found herself paying more attention to her appearance, buying a new dress for Saturday night, and then immediately second-guessing herself. Was she moving too fast? Was she being foolish? Friday evening, she was in her garden when she heard Mrs. Martinez calling over the fence. "Sarah dear, how are you?" Sarah looked up to see her elderly neighbor's kind face peering through the gap in the fence. Mrs. Martinez had always been sweet to her, bringing over homemade tamales during the holidays and checking in after the divorce. "I'm well, Mrs. Martinez. How are you feeling?" Sarah knew the older woman had been dealing with some health issues lately. "Oh, getting older isn't for the weak," Mrs. Martinez said with a laugh. "But I'm managing. David's been such a help since he moved back." "He's a good boy, my David." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "He seems very nice." "He is, and lonely, I think. He tries to hide it, but a mother knows these things." Mrs. Martinez's eyes twinkled. "He mentioned he was having dinner with a friend tomorrow night. First time in months he seemed excited about anything." Sarah's heart fluttered. Had David told his mother about their dinner? "That's nice for him," Sarah said carefully. "Yes, it is. Sarah, sometimes the best things come when we're not looking for them, when we're just trying to heal and live our lives." The words felt like a gentle blessing, and Sarah found herself smiling. "Thank you, Mrs. Martinez." "For what, dear?" "For raising such a thoughtful son." Mrs. Martinez beamed. "He gets that from his father. Rest his soul, but that man could read people like books. David has that same gift." Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth for October. Sarah changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that made her feel confident, without trying too hard. She was nervous, more nervous than she'd been since her first date with her ex-husband 15 years ago. David picked her up at 7, looking handsome in a dark blue button-down that brought out his eyes. He held the car door open for her, a small gesture that made her heart flutter. "You look beautiful," he said as they drove toward downtown, and Sarah felt the compliment settle into her bones like sunshine. The restaurant was perfect. Small, intimate, with soft lighting and the kind of atmosphere that invited conversation. They were seated at a corner table, away from the bustle of the main dining room. "This is lovely," Sarah said, looking around at the warm, inviting space. "I hoped you'd like it. I've been saving this place for a special occasion. And this qualifies." "As special?" Sarah asked, surprised by her own boldness. David's gaze was steady, serious. "Definitely." They ordered wine and settled into conversation that flowed more easily than Sarah had expected. David told her about his decision to leave his practice in Chicago and come home to help his mother, about the challenge of building a new client base in a smaller town. "Do you miss the city?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes. But I realized I was hiding there, using the anonymity as an excuse not to really connect with anyone. Here, I can't hide. Everyone knows everyone." Sarah understood that feeling. After her divorce, she'd considered moving somewhere new, starting fresh where no one knew her story. But something had held her back. "I thought about leaving too," she admitted, "after everything fell apart. But this is home. And I didn't want to run away from my problems. I wanted to figure out how to live with them." "That's very wise," David said. "Running away rarely solves anything. It just changes the scenery." They talked about books, about travel, about the small moments that made life meaningful. Sarah found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. David had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and she loved the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said as they shared dessert. "Of course. When you said you went through something similar, what happened?" David was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Her name was Lisa. We were together for 3 years, lived together for 2. I thought we were building something real, something lasting. But I was the only one building. She was just there, going through the motions. Sarah's chest tightened, with recognition. How did you know? One day I realized I couldn't remember the last time she'd asked me about my day. Really asked, not just as a formality. I started paying attention, and I saw that she never really saw me. I was just ... convenient. That's exactly how I felt, Sarah whispered. Like I was a piece of furniture. Useful, but not particularly interesting. The worst part was that I started to believe it, David continued. Started to think that maybe I wasn't worth really knowing. It took a long time to realize that the problem wasn't me. It was that we weren't right for each other. Sarah felt tears threatening. I'm sorry. I know how much that hurts. It does. But it also taught me what I actually want. I want someone who sees me, who's curious about my thoughts and dreams. Someone who chooses to be with me, not just someone who's comfortable with the arrangement. The words hung between them, and Sarah felt the weight of possibility. Was he describing what he wanted in general, or what he hoped they might have together? I want that too, she said softly. I'm just scared I've forgotten how to be that person for someone. I don't think you've forgotten, David said, reaching across the table to touch her hand gently. I think you've just been with someone who didn't appreciate it. The touch sent electricity through her, and Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. It was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. They walked slowly back to his car, neither wanting the evening to end. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, and Sarah felt like she was seeing the world with new eyes. Thank you, she said as they drove home, for tonight, for seeing me. I haven't felt like myself in a long time. Thank you for trusting me with your time, David replied. I know it wasn't easy. When they reached her house, David walked her to the door. They stood on her porch, the air between them charged with possibility. I had a wonderful time, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. So did I. David stepped closer, and Sarah's heart began to race. Sarah, I want to be honest with you about something. She looked up at him, searching his face in the porch light. I've been watching you for longer than I admitted. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, making her smile. But I've been attracted to you for a while. Even when I thought you were happily married, I couldn't help but notice you. The way you tend your garden, the way you smile at the mail carrier, the way you helped Mrs. Peterson with her groceries last month when she was recovering from surgery. Sarah's breath caught. He had noticed all of that. I want to get to know you better, David continued. But I also want to be respectful of where you are in your healing process. I don't want to rush you or pressure you into anything you're not ready for. Sarah felt a rush of affection for this man who was being so careful with her heart. What if I told you I'm tired of being careful? What if I told you that sitting across from you tonight made me feel more alive than I have in years? David's eyes darkened with something that made her stomach flutter. Then I'd say we should see where this goes. Slowly, carefully, but ... together. Together, Sarah repeated, liking the sound of the word. David leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Instead, Sarah rose up on her, tiptoes to meet him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as they both gave in to the connection that had been building between them. When they finally broke apart, Sarah felt dizzy with possibility. I should go, David said, though he made no move to leave. You should, Sarah agreed, but her hand was still resting on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Breakfast. Tomorrow?" he asked hopefully. "I'd like that," Sarah said, smiling up at him. After he left, Sarah leaned against her front door, her heart pounding. She felt like a teenager again, giddy with the possibility of new love. But underneath the excitement was something deeper, a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. She was still healing, still figuring out who she was outside of her marriage. But maybe that was okay. Maybe healing didn't mean waiting until you were completely whole before letting someone else into your life. Maybe it meant finding someone who would help you put the pieces back together. The next morning, Sarah woke up earlier than usual, her heart racing with anticipation. She chose her outfit carefully, jeans and a soft sweater that made her feel comfortable and confident. As she was putting on her makeup, she heard a knock at the door. It was David, holding 2 cups of coffee and a bag from the local bakery. "I thought we could have breakfast in your garden," he said, gesturing toward her backyard. "If that's okay with you." Sarah's heart melted. He remembered how much she loved her garden, how proud she was of the space she'd created. "That sounds perfect," she said, leading him through the house to the back door. They settled on the small patio Sarah had built herself after the divorce, surrounded by the flowers she'd planted as a symbol of her new beginning. The morning sun filtered through the leaves of the old oak tree, creating patterns of light and shadow across the table. "This is beautiful," David said, looking around at the carefully tended space. "You've created something really special here. Thank you. It's been my therapy, I guess. Something to nurture and watch grow. I can see why. There's something peaceful about it." They ate pastries and drank coffee, talking about everything and nothing. Sarah found herself studying David's face in the morning light, memorizing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way he listened to her with his whole attention. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they finished eating. "Anything. What are you thinking right now? I mean, about this, about us." David set down his coffee cup and looked at her seriously. "I'm thinking that I want to know everything. About you. I want to know what makes you laugh, what makes you cry, what you dream about when you can't sleep. I want to know your fears and your hopes and the silly things that make you happy." Sarah's chest tightened with emotion. "That's a lot to want." "I know. And I'm thinking that I want to tell you all of those things about me too. I want to be known by you. Really known. In a way I haven't been in a long time." "I want that too," Sarah said softly. "But I'm scared." "What scares you most?" Sarah considered the question. "I'm scared that I'll disappoint you, that you'll get to know me and realize I'm not worth the effort. I'm scared that I'm too broken to be in a relationship with anyone right now." David reached across the table and took her hand. "Sarah, you're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I recognize the signs. I've been where you are. And I can see your strength, even if you can't see it yourself." Sarah felt tears threaten, but they were good tears. "I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to let you down. The only way you could hurt me is if you weren't honest with me. If you pretended to be someone you're not, or if you pushed me away because you're scared. I can handle your fear, Sarah. I can handle your uncertainty. What I can't handle is dishonesty." Sarah looked at him, this man who seemed to see straight through to her soul, and felt something shift inside her. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect. Maybe she didn't have to have all the answers. Maybe she just had to be willing to try. "Okay," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Let's try. Let's see where this goes." David's smile was radiant. Yeah, but I need you to be patient with me. I need you to tell me when I'm pulling away or building walls. I need you to help me remember that it's okay to let someone in. I can do that, David said, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to her palm. And I need you to tell me when I'm pushing too hard or moving too fast. I need you to remind me that healing takes time. I can do that too, Sarah said, feeling like they were making some kind of sacred agreement. They spent the rest of the morning in the garden, David helping her with some weeding while they talked. Sarah found herself marveling at how natural it felt to have him in her space. How right it seemed to be working alongside him. I should probably head home, David said eventually. I promised my mother I'd take her grocery shopping this afternoon. Of course, Sarah said, though she was disappointed to see him go. But maybe we could do this again tomorrow. I could make you dinner this time. Sarah's heart fluttered. I'd like that. David kissed her goodbye, a soft, lingering kiss that made her toes curl. As she watched him walk around the side of the house toward his own yard, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement about the future. The next few weeks passed in a blur of dinners and long conversations, of stolen kisses and gentle touches. Sarah found herself opening up to David in ways she hadn't expected, sharing stories about her childhood, her dreams, her fears. He listened to everything with the same careful attention, never judging, never trying to fix her. In return, David shared his own vulnerabilities, his fear of not being enough, his struggle with perfectionism, his deep desire to build something meaningful with someone who truly saw him. Sarah found herself falling for not just his strength, but his gentleness, his willingness to be vulnerable with her. One evening, as they walked through the neighborhood after dinner, David stopped suddenly. What is it? Sarah asked. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice serious. I'm falling in love with you, Sarah. I know it's fast, and I know you might not be ready to hear it, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. Sarah's heart stopped. The words she'd been afraid to even think hung in the air between them, and she felt tears spring to her eyes. David ... double quotes she started, but he held up a hand. You don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest about where I am. Sarah looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life when she least expected it, who had been so patient and gentle with her healing heart. She thought about all the ways he'd shown her she was worth loving, worth knowing, worth choosing. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. David's face broke into a smile so bright it could have lit up the entire street. Really? Really? And that scares me to death. Good, David said, pulling her into his arms. Love should be a little scary. It means it matters. He kissed her then, right there under the streetlight, and Sarah felt like she was finally, truly home. Not because she'd found someone to complete her, but because she'd found someone who saw her as already whole, already worthy of love. As they walked back toward their houses, hand in hand, Sarah realized that sometimes the most unexpected moments could change everything. Sometimes healing didn't mean waiting until you were perfect. It meant being brave enough to let someone love you while you were still becoming who you were meant to be. And sometimes the person you needed most lived right next door, waiting for the perfect moment to sit beside you and change your world forever. The rest, as they say, was just the beginning.